Hi everyone, this is Mark Buckles for New Mexico State University Carlsbad. This VoiceThread PowerPoint lecture presents basic concepts addressed in this course, Principles of Human Communication. It's important to remember that communication studies uses social science methodology to gather its knowledge. The ideas presented in this class are the results of quantitative and qualitative research. Among Learning Module 1's goals are to learn about the essential principles that explain how communication works and to learn to begin to internalize the characteristics of communication competence. Among the benefits to be found in studying human communication are those impacting your relationships, both in the workplace and interpersonally, your abilities to influence others, and of course, your abilities to apply critical thinking to media messages. We'll consider 8 forms of human communication: intrapersonal, communication with yourself; interpersonal, with others; interviewing, an important method of qualitative research and of persuasion; and small group communication, often related to today's workplace. Also related to the workplace and broader society is organizational communication, the ways in which our systems send and receive messages, public speaking, still an essential aspect of leadership, and in the brave new world we occupy, the forms of communication represented by the computer and by mass communication. Communication, as any social enterprise, occurs within contexts. Our messages are communicated with a physical context, a social psychological context, complex outer and inner worlds impacting participants, a temporal time context, and so very importantly, a cultural context. In Figure 1.1, we see illustrated the dynamics affecting a moment of communication. I call your attention to the essential terms and their accompanying concepts. At the center of the dynamic is the message. We see that communication is transactional. We are both senders and receivers of messages. We see that a moment of communication produces an effect, and that the transaction is bound within context, and that each element in the diagram impacts the message. Let's consider the difference between messages and meta-messages. Messages may be verbal or nonverbal. In communication, feedback messages must occur, and feed-forward messages of varying degrees of efficiency will occur as well. Meta-messages are communication about communication. This entire course is a meta-message. I said that feedback messages must occur. The feedback may be positive or negative. It may be person or message focused. It may be immediate or delayed. We may find the feedback has been communicated with low monitoring on the part of the receiver. Or, depending on the context, the feedback may be highly monitored. The sender may communicate supportive or critical feedback or something of both. Feed-forward messages are messages at the beginning of the communicative transaction, and they serve to open the channels of communication, to preview the message itself, to altercast, assign the receiver a particular identity or role in the moment of communication about to take place, or disclaim, a plea to be heard without bias by the receiver and favorably. We return to our diagram to reflect on channels, the medium through which the message passes. That media may be vocal, visual, olfactory, or tactile. We are physical beings with senses, and rarely does a message pass through one communication channel. Finally, let's consider noise or interference. Noise is present to the extent the message sent is not the one received. Noise can be physical, physiological, psychological, or semantic, word-based. The effects of communication will be intellectual or cognitive, affective from the realms of feeling or emotion, or psychomotor. Now let's consider the principles, the fundamental truths that research has established exist in human communication. Communication is purposeful. It is not unpurposeful. We will use it to investigate, to relate, to solve, to persuade, or to enjoy, or to do the opposites of these things. Communication is transactional. It is complex, changing, relational, and interactive. Communication is a package of signals. Verbal and nonverbal messages reinforce one another. Communication is a process of adjustment. No two human beings use identical signal systems, and effective communicators accommodate their communication patterns to those with whom they interact. Communication involves content and relationship dimensions. Remember, it's never only about the content of a message. We ignore relationship dimensions at our own peril and risk ineffectiveness when we do. Communication is ambiguous. We need to pursue its meanings, to ask questions, to encourage qualifications and explanations, and to mirror back our own understanding to allow the sender to make the message's meanings more precise. Now we come to some of my favorite ideas in the entire course. Communication is inevitable, irreversible, and unrepeatable. We cannot not communicate. Research establishes that messages are always being sent. We cannot undo what we've communicated. Reality is never quite the same. Finally, the competent communicator thinks critically and mindfully about communication, is culturally sensitive, is ethical, is an effective listener. When we discuss being an effective listener in this course, we're referring to the three behaviors which constitute active listening technique, behaviors I've hinted at in the earlier slide. This concludes Learning Module 1's PowerPoint lecture. We're off and running now. Thanks for listening.